To learn what it is like to be under fire, 3 quivering recruits faced a Kalashnikov rifle and a machine gun firing live ammunition. They were not firing accurately, but it was close enough to make a fatal mistake. We're now at Ambrizette, the most northern town captured in the 3-pronged attack on the National Front. The 9th Brigade of 4,000 men captured Ambrizette 3 days ago. But most important of all, the commander of the 9th Brigade says that 200 Cuban soldiers were with them. He says they are very good combat troops. It is the first time anybody's ever admitted that the Cubans are right here in the front line. Certainly, at the dusty airstrip at Ambrizette, there were almost as many Cubans as Angolans. They had flown our plane in from Luanda and drove our transport. They are distinctive. They carry only Russian weapons, while the Angolans wear camouflaged combat suits and carry a variety of Russian, Israeli, German and Belgian-designed sidearms. With them go junior soldiers like this 14-year-old. His weapon was only an air rifle, though teenage recruits little older than him are much more heavily armed. They still have not had time at Ambrizette to paint out the old slogans. The tiny airstrip office still bears the graffiti, "Ambrizette belongs to the FNLA." The only evidence of any damage is the burnt-out wreck of a helicopter beside the runway. But there have been casualties. Wounded soldiers and civilians that arrived at the airstrip were evidence. But there are no figures of casualties in this civil war. The front lines are fluid, and there are very few set battles. Ambrizette itself is a primitive coastal farming and fishing community where the National Liberation Front troops had billeted themselves in the town's largest buildings. In one, we saw 700 crates of .762 ammunition sent from Zaire. There were also crates of anti-aircraft shells, mortar bombs and heavy machine gun ammunition. Piles of weapons had been captured, including rocket launchers and anti-aircraft guns. Most of them were many years old, although they had never been used. The more recent were still packed in American crates, bearing the label "For Mutual Defense." Outside, captured documents detailing food and supplies imported from Zaire lay amongst the debris of National Liberation Front flags. 7 of the prisoners sat bewildered under the guns of the Popular Movement troops. They said they came from the south and stayed behind to chance their luck, rather than face a further retreat north. Certainly the National Liberation Front seems to have been almost rolled up. But even then it will leave the Popular Movement controlling only half the country. They expect to put an end to any resistance in the north by the middle of next week. But the fate of Angola will only be decided when they and their Cuban allies turn all their strength southwards against the more powerful UNITA forces and their South African allies. Keith Hatfield, News at 10 at Ambrizette in northern Angola. Angola's capital, Luanda, 200 miles from the fighting in the north and the south, is anything but a city at war. It's neither an armed camp nor a town under siege. But the people of Luanda face considerable deprivation because of the war. Although on a fine, sunny weekend like anywhere else, the people of Luanda come down to the beach. Living with the war is an accepted way of life. But not everyone is keen to be seen enjoying themselves. A party of Russian advisors walked away when we interrupted their sunbathing. They crossed onto the part of the beach reserved only for Angolan troops and their allies. Behind them, anti-aircraft guns and 6 field guns were dug in and camouflaged in positions that protect the entrance to Luanda harbour. In the centre of Luanda, the symbols of 500 years of colonial rule have been removed. The plinths that once bore the statues of Portugal's heroes are daubed with Popular Movement slogans. The monument to Portugal's unknown soldier is covered in red sheets. It was too heavy to pull it off its mounting. The medieval fort overlooking Luanda harbour is the headquarters of the Popular Movement's army. Until independence, it was the home of the Portuguese High Command in Angola. Inside, it's the graveyard of the Portuguese notables and their Angolan connection. among them Vasco da Gama, the navigator and explorer, a 15-foot-high statue of the first king of Portugal. They are all witness to the upheaval in Angola, but they are ignored by the fort's new occupants, Angolan and Cuban troops. The soldiers are much in evidence in Luanda, many of them heavily armed. The Cubans don't like being photographed, but they stay in the city's best hotels and eat with their Russian and East European advisors. But for most of the Luandans, life is much more severe. The nightclubs and discotheques have been closed by decree. The penalty for the most petty offence is a sentence to a detention centre to cultivate vegetables. Luanda needs those vegetables more than the unfinished remnants of Portuguese planning. The city is littered with half-completed office blocks, flats and hotels. The architects and the craftsmen have returned to Portugal. At present, there are other priorities. This Russian freighter was the only ship being unloaded on Sunday. Its deck cargo was tracked amphibious vehicles. They looked like Russian PMP pontoons, designed to carry tanks, lorries and infantry across rivers. They would be ideal in the north, where bridges have been destroyed by the retreating National Liberation Front. Cuban officers prevented us from filming them in detail, but certainly weapons, military supplies and soldiers are the only commodity not in short supply in Angola. Keith Hatfield, News at 10, Luanda in Angola. 8 weeks ago, these young men were in the Angolan bush or living in the shanty towns of Angola's cities. Now, after an intensive course of Cuban and Russian instruction, they are set to join the Popular Movement's 30,000-man army. The Popular Movement's defense minister, Ico Carrero, handed out the berets that confirm them as combat troops. They have no rank, they are known as camaradas, and their promotion is sealed with the complicated Popular Movement handshake. Like the bugler, the army lacks the finesse of an established force. The Popular Movement was born during the 14-year guerrilla campaign against the Portuguese. Now they have army colors, but their campaign chants, deriding imperialism and colonialism, are the parade ground routine. The Popular Movement troops march impeccably in their unique style. As it would be in Aldershot, the relatives watch with pride as the troops head for the battlefront. No one knows how many thousands have died in Angola's civil war. The Popular Movement remembered their dead by burying 4 rifle bayonets into the parade ground beneath their flag. The black berets commemorated 4 of their heroes. Then the lessons their soldiers had learnt during their military and political instruction. How to jump off and back onto a lorry at high speed. No one explained why this was important. To learn what it is like to be under fire, 3 quivering recruits faced a Kalashnikov rifle and a machine gun firing live ammunition. They were not firing accurately, but it was close enough to make a fatal mistake. Then, for the first time, the impressive range of Russian equipment that has made it impossible for their rivals without equal American support to stand in their way. Anti-aircraft guns that so far have not been needed, as the Civil War has been fought on the ground. The Russian BM-21 rocket launcher, the most devastating weapon in their armory. Each lorry can fire 40 high-explosive rockets, each with a range of 12 miles. This has been the job for the Cubans, and only long-range South African artillery has been able to match it. They also have the complete range of Russian infantry-borne anti-tank weapons. Their field artillery will be unmatched if support for the National Liberation Front and UNITA dries up. Until now, the popular movement has always denied it has imported Russian tanks. But a vintage T-34 and a more modern T-54 could not be hidden. We were allowed to film them only after the Russian or Cuban officers had taken shelter. But the public display is a symptom of the popular movement's confidence that they, with their Russian and Cuban support, have the total domination of Angola within their sights. Keith Hatfield, News at 10, at Luanda in Angola. At the heart of the MPLA is what's called the Department for the Organization of the Masses. Its job is to mobilize support for the movement. And nowhere is it easier in Angola than in this sprawl of tin-roofed mud huts in Luanda. It's an urban slum that is home for 350,000 people. The slums ring Luanda, a city of tall, balconied blocks of flats and wide boulevards. It was here that the MPLA president, Dr. Agostinho Neto, practiced medicine. With his supporters, most of them middle-class professional men dedicated to Marxism, he organized political cells in the slums to agitate against Portuguese rule. The slums gave birth to what is known in Angola as People's Power. But now Dr. Neto and the leaders of the MPLA denounce any Marxist or communist influence. They insist their ambition is to convert the people of Angola to African socialism. They say they have no long-term obligations to the Russians or the Cubans, but that they need the European and American technology to develop the country. The Constitution specifically rules out any foreign military alliance, but the propaganda bulletins are loaded with praise for the Cubans and Russians, with violent criticism of the Portuguese, South Africans and Americans. The MPLA still organizes the people of the shanty towns into political cells of 10 or 12. They are called sympathizers who support the movement, adherents who are more committed, or militants who become soldiers. They were encouraged to burn down the shops and houses owned by the Portuguese, and in some cases they tore them apart by hand. And the MPLA begin their indoctrination at the earliest age. Education is basic but available to all, and after school most of these children are trained as young pioneers and taught how to use weapons. But political consciousness seems absent amongst most people in Luanda's shanty towns. There is an air of timelessness far removed from Angola's civil war, and they seem unimpressed by the MPLA's revolutionary enthusiasm. Keith Hatfield, News at 10 in Luanda.